The first time Alex felt her touch, it burned like ice against his skin. He'd been lying there, blood pooling beneath him on the dusty ground of what used to be Outpost Zeta, convinced these were his final moments. The plasma round had torn through his combat suit just below the ribs, a fatal wound this far from any medical facility. His squad was gone, communication systems fried in the ambush. As consciousness began to slip away, strange lights danced across the horizon. That's when she found him. "Stay still, human," she whispered, her voice somehow inside his head rather than reaching his ears. The translator implant shouldn't have worked on any non-coalition species, yet he understood every word. Alex tried to focus on her face, but his vision swam with each labored breath. She wasn't human, that much was clear from the luminescent patterns that pulsed beneath her translucent skin. Her eyes, large and completely black, reflected the 3 moons overhead like obsidian mirrors. "I'm dying," Alex managed to say, tasting copper with each word. "Perhaps," she replied, her head tilting at an angle that seemed impossible for vertebrate anatomy. "Or perhaps this is your beginning." When her 6-fingered hand pressed against his wound, Alex expected agony. Instead, an electric sensation shot through his body, not pain, but something far more profound. It felt like every cell in his body suddenly remembered something long forgotten. His back arched involuntarily as energy coursed through him, his mind flooded with fragments of memories that weren't his own. Vast starfields, crystalline cities suspended between gas giants, beings of pure light communicating through thought alone. The wound closed beneath her touch. Alex could feel tissue knitting together, blood cells regenerating at impossible speeds. But something else was happening too, something changing within him at a fundamental level. "What did you do to me?" he gasped, sitting up and touching the smooth, unmarked skin where the gaping wound had been moments before. The alien was already backing away, her movements fluid like water flowing uphill. "I restored what was damaged," she said, though her mouth didn't move. "But your kind was never meant to receive our essence directly. The connection has been made. The memories will come. And they will look for you now." "Who will look for me? What memories?" Alex scrambled to his feet, surprising himself with how steady he felt. Better than steady, he felt stronger than he'd ever been. The night around him seemed different too. He could see heat signatures in the darkness, hear the subtle movements of creatures burrowing underground nearly 1/2 kilometer away. "The veil has been protecting your species for millennia," she continued, seemingly unbothered by his questions. "Your people believe you're alone in this sector of the galaxy. A convenient fiction we've maintained. But my intervention has complicated things." Alex took a step toward her, but she raised a hand in warning. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed faster, more intensely. "Listen carefully, human. They'll sense the change in you. The Coalition isn't the only power in these stars, and some have waited a very long time to find a way through our defenses. What flows in you now is both gift and burden." "I don't understand any of this," Alex said, frustration building. "Who are you? What are they? What's happening to me?" The alien's expression shifted into something unreadable. "You were a soldier before. Now you're something more. A bridge between worlds that were never meant to connect." She gestured to the stars above. "In saving your life, I may have endangered countless others. The knowledge within you, fragments of our civilization that span eons, it was never meant for human minds." A distant sound like thunder rolled across the barren landscape, but the sky remained clear. The alien looked toward it, alarm evident in her posture. "They're coming sooner than I anticipated. The connection is stronger than I realized." She turned back to Alex, her voice urgent in his mind. "Find the others like you. There have been incidents before. Accidents. 7 others carry our essence. Together, you might survive what's coming." The ground beneath them began to tremble. In the distance, the horizon glowed with unnatural light. "Wait," Alex called as she began to move away with impossible speed. "I don't even know what to call you." She paused, looking back one final time. "Names are a human concept. But if you need one, you may call me Vela." Then, faster than human eyes should be able to track, she vanished into the darkness. But Alex could still see her heat signature racing away, could still sense her presence somehow, a new sense he couldn't explain. And something else too, a growing awareness of other presences, distant but distinct, scattered across Earth and its colonies. 7 points of light in his mind, 7 others like him. As the rumbling grew stronger and the unnatural light approached, Alex knew with sudden certainty that nothing in human history had prepared any of them for what was coming. Alex ran. His body moved with a coordination and speed he'd never known before, navigating the rocky terrain of the abandoned outpost without effort. The approaching light grew brighter behind him, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach for him with every step. Whatever was coming, every new instinct screamed at him to avoid it. The outpost's remaining structures loomed ahead. Alex ducked into what had been the communications bunker, now just a shell of twisted metal and shattered equipment after the attack. He needed a plan. He needed weapons. He needed answers. His training as a coalition special operations soldier had prepared him for survival in hostile territory, but nothing had prepared him for this. As he caught his breath, surprised he barely needed to, fragmented images flickered through his mind. Vast spacecraft drifting between stars, beings with bodies that defied human understanding, civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. "Get it together," he muttered to himself, pressing his palms against his temples. The memories that weren't his own threatened to overwhelm him. He focused on what Vela had said, 7 others like him. 7 others who might understand what was happening. A sudden flash of insight cut through the chaos in his mind. He knew where one of them was. Somehow, he could sense a presence, a beacon of familiar energy, approximately 200 kilometers to the east. The knowledge came with absolute certainty, like remembering the location of his childhood home. The ground shook violently, and dust rained from what remained of the bunker ceiling. Alex peered through a gap in the wall. The light had stopped advancing about a kilometer away, hovering just above the ground. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate, like a signal that Alex's enhanced vision revealed something impossible. The air itself was tearing open, revealing a swirling darkness beyond. The rift expanded slowly, methodically, as if testing the boundaries between realities. Dimensional BR. He said, the term coming to him from nowhere. They're creating a gateway. He didn't know how he knew this, but the certainty was absolute. The knowledge felt ancient, like it had been waiting dormant within him until Vela's touch activated it. Alex searched the ruins for anything useful. In a partially collapsed locker, he found his squad's emergency beacon. It was military grade, designed to cut through almost any interference. He activated it, then hesitated before selecting a frequency. His fingers moved of their own accord, inputting a sequence he'd never been taught. "This is Zeta 7, he said into the transmitter, the code name forming in his mind unbidden. "Breach event in progress at outpost Zeta coordinates. Seeking confluence with the other marked. Authentication sequence follows." Again, his fingers danced across the controls, sending a burst of data he couldn't have possibly known. That he waited, counting heartbeats that seemed too steady, too strong to be his own. After 30 seconds, the beacon chirped. "Authentication accepted, Zeta 7, came a voice, distorted by static but unmistakably human. "Proximity alert. Tau 4 is inbound to your position. ETA 20 minutes. Advise immediate withdrawal from breach site minimum 5 kilometers. Further instructions to follow." Alex's mind reeled. Someone had answered. Someone who understood the codes he'd somehow known. Someone who recognized what was happening. That he grabbed what supplies he could find. A combat knife, emergency rations, a half-depleted water purifier, and slipped out of the bunker's rear exit. The rift had grown larger, now spanning at least 50 meters across. Dark shapes moved within the void, indistinct but unmistakably alive. As Alex put distance between himself and the breach, his enhanced hearing picked up a sound that chilled him to the core, a high-pitched, harmonized tone that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his bones. He recognized it instantly as a hunting call. The knowledge came in a flash. They were called the Voidborn, ancient enemies of Vela's kind. They existed partially outside normal space-time, perceiving reality through means humans had no concept for. And they hungered for something specific, the very essence that now flowed through his veins. Alex scaled a ridge and looked back. The breach had stabilized, and something was emerging, a shape that seemed to fold and unfold through dimensions his eyes couldn't properly process. It hurt to look at it directly, like his brain was rejecting what his eyes were seeing. They've been trying to find a way through for millennia, he whispered to himself, another fragment of inherited knowledge surfacing. The veil kept them out until now. Until me. A wave of guilt crashed over him. Had his survival doomed this world? Was the approaching horror his responsibility? The sound of an approaching vehicle pulled him from these thoughts. A rugged transport skimmer appeared on the horizon, moving fast across the desert floor. It bore no coalition markings, instead displaying an unfamiliar symbol, a spiral within a triangle. As it drew closer, Alex sensed it, another presence like his own. Another of the marked. Taufor. The skimmer slowed, hovering a meter above the ground. Its side door slid open to reveal a woman in civilian clothes, her eyes reflecting the moonlight with the same strange luminescence Alex had noticed in his own when he'd caught his reflection in a fragment of glass. "You look terrible for someone who just survived a plasma wound," she called out, her voice casual despite the circumstances. "I'm Ray. And unless you want to be here when that thing fully materializes, you should get in. Now." Behind them, the breach flared with unnatural light as more shapes began to emerge from the void. Alex didn't hesitate. He jumped into the skimmer as Ray gunned the engines, the vehicle lurching forward with enough force to slam him against the seat. Behind them, the dimensional breach pulsed with increasing intensity, casting eerie shadows across the barren landscape. "You've got questions," Ray said, her eyes fixed on the terrain ahead as she navigated at breakneck speed. "Everyone does it first. But we need to get to the sanctuary before those things fully cross over." "Sanctuary?" Alex asked, gripping the dashboard as the skimmer took a sharp turn around a rock formation. "Safe house. One of 7 across the colonies. Built by people who've known about the veil and what's beyond it for generations." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. People who've been preparing for the day it would inevitably fail. Alex's mind was racing, trying to sort through the fragments of alien knowledge that kept surfacing. "How long have you been like this?" 3 years, Ray replied. "Mining accident on Titan. Everyone else died when our hab dome collapsed. I was impaled by a support beam. Should have died too, but one of Vela's kind found me." She tapped her chest. "Changed everything." The skimmer's communications panel lit up with an incoming transmission. Ray answered it with a quick touch. "Taufor, perimeter sensors show multiple breach events forming in your sector," came a terse male voice. "You've got company incoming. Estimate 5 minutes until intercept." "Copy that," Ray responded. "Got Zeta 7 with me. He's fresh, still integrating." "Understood. Epsilon 2 is dispatching support. Try to stay alive until then." The transmission cut off. Alex looked at Ray, who was now checking what appeared to be a weapons locker built into the skimmer's side panel. "Who was that?" Alex asked. "Delta 1. Our coordinator." She pulled out what looked like a modified pulse rifle and tossed it to him. "He was the first. Been marked for almost 15 years now. The Coalition thinks he died during first contact." Alex caught the weapon, surprised at how naturally his hands adjusted to its weight and balance. Knowledge of its operation flooded his mind, another gift from Vela's touch. "The Coalition doesn't know about any of this, do they?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Ray's laugh was bitter. "The official stance is that we're the only intelligent life in this sector. Makes it easier to expand, colonize, extract resources. The truth." She gestured broadly at the sky. "There are at least 17 spacefaring civilizations within 100 light-years. Most are peaceful. Some aren't. And a few, like the Voidborn, aren't even from this reality." The skimmer's sensors suddenly blared. 3 rapidly moving objects were approaching from behind. "Speaking of which," Ray muttered, pulling the skimmer into a ravine for cover. "Scouts. They're faster than the main force." We need to take them out before they can report our position. Alex felt it then, a crawling sensation at the base of his skull, like something cold and ancient was reaching for his mind. The Voidborn were hunting them. Hunting him. They can sense us, can't they? He asked. The essence or whatever it is that Vela put in us. Ray nodded grimly. It's what they want. What they've always wanted. The ability to exist fully in our dimension. Checked her own weapon. Ready to fight things that shouldn't exist? Before Alex could answer, something massive landed on the skimmer's roof with enough force to dent the metal. A limb, if you could call it that, punched through, black and glistening, ending in what looked like dozens of writhing, finger-like appendages. Ray fired her weapon without hesitation, the energy pulse blasting through the roof and the thing attached to it. A high-pitched keening filled the air, like metal scraping against metal amplified 1,000-fold. Go! She shouted, kicking open her door. Into the ravine. The skimmers compromised. They barely made it 5 meters before the vehicle exploded behind them, the force throwing them forward. Alex rolled, coming up in a defensive position, weapon raised. What he saw froze his blood. 3 entities approached, their bodies constantly shifting between states of matter, as if reality itself couldn't agree on what they were. They moved with a terrible grace, flowing across the ground like living oil that occasionally solidified into jointed limbs before dissolving again. Don't look directly at them. Ray shouted, firing a series of precise shots. They'll try to get in your head. Alex followed her lead, shooting at the nearest creature. The pulse hit, carving a hole through its amorphous body, but the wound sealed almost instantly. Conventional weapons only slow them down, Ray explained, backing up as they fired. But there's another way. Something only we can do. She held out her free hand, and to Alex's astonishment, energy began to coalesce around it, the same luminescent patterns he'd seen beneath Vela's skin. The essence she gave us, Ray said, her voice strained with effort, it can be channeled. Focused. The energy shot forward from her palm, striking the nearest Voidborn. Unlike the weapon's fire, this energy didn't just damage the creature, it unmade it, causing its form to collapse in on itself until nothing remained. How did you, Alex began, but the words died in his throat as another Voidborn lunged at him. Instinctively, he raised his hand. Something stirred within him, power unlike anything he'd ever felt. It rushed up from some hidden core of his being, racing along pathways that hadn't existed in his body until Vela had touched him, but the energy wouldn't focus. It built painfully within him, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. You have to control it. Ray shouted, grappling with the third creature. Find the memory, the knowledge of how to channel it is in there. Alex closed his eyes, desperately searching through the alien memories flooding his mind. There, a technique, ancient beyond comprehension. He shaped the energy as instructed, feeling it respond to his will. When he opened his eyes, power erupted from his hand, not in a focused beam like Ray's, but in a wild, expanding sphere that engulfed both remaining Voidborn. They shrieked as the energy consumed them, their bodies dissolving into particles that scattered on the wind. The effort left Alex gasping, his knees buckling beneath him. That was impressive, Ray said, helping him up. And completely untrained. You could have killed us both. Before Alex could respond, the ground trembled beneath them. In the distance, where the original breach had been, a column of darkness now rose into the sky, spreading outward like a canopy of night. It's happening, Ray whispered, her voice hollow with dread. The main breach is stabilizing. We're out of time. What does that mean? Alex asked, though part of him already knew. It means their harbinger is coming through, she answered. And once it establishes a foothold in our reality, nothing will stop the rest from following. A sudden wind whipped around them, carrying with it whispers in a language no human throat could produce. Yet somehow, Alex understood fragments. The marked one, fresh essence, take him, Ray grabbed his arm. We need to move. The others are gathering at the sanctuary. It's our only chance. What others? Alex asked as they began to run. The remaining marked. All 7 of us. Her expression was grim but determined. "There's a reason there are 7 sanctuaries, Alex. A reason Vela's people have only created 7 of us. Together, we can close the breaches permanently. But it requires all of us. And if we fail..." The earth shook again, more violently this time. In the sky above the breach, stars began to vanish, swallowed by spreading darkness. "If we fail," Ray said quietly, "then everything ends. Not just humanity. Everything." A deafening roar split the air, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. On the horizon, something vast was taking shape, its outline defying the natural laws of perspective and dimension. The harbinger had arrived, and somewhere, deep in Alex's mind, he felt Vela's presence stir, as if awakening from a long sleep. Her voice, faint but growing stronger, whispered, "Remember what I gave you, human. It was never just healing. It was the key to everything." He looked at his hands, watching as the same luminescent patterns he'd seen on Vela's skin began to glow beneath his own. The patterns beneath Alex's skin pulsed with increasing intensity, casting eerie blue light across the barren landscape as he and Ray sprinted toward a ridgeline. Each step felt impossibly light, as if gravity itself had loosened its hold on him. Behind them, the harbinger continued to materialize, a towering monstrosity that seemed to exist in multiple places at once, its form continuously folding and unfolding through dimensions beyond human comprehension. "There." Ray pointed to a narrow crevice in the ridge ahead. "Underground passage. Leads to the sanctuary." They were 50 meters from safety when Alex felt it, a presence in his mind, vast and ancient, sifting through his thoughts like fingers through sand. "Ray," he gasped, stumbling. "Something's in my head." She grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "Fight it. They're trying to access Vela's essence through you." Alex pushed back against the invading presence, imagining barriers around his thoughts. The technique came instinctively, another fragment of knowledge from Vela's memories. The presence receded, but not before he caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. The Voidborn weren't just invading. They were searching for something specific. Something they believed was hidden on Earth. As they reached the crevice, a blinding light flashed overhead. A coalition dropship descended rapidly, weapon systems active and tracking. "No," Ray breathed. "They can't be here. Not now." The dropship's external speakers crackled to life. "Attention, unidentified individuals. This is Coalition Special Forces. You are in a restricted military zone during an active Class A anomaly event. Surrender immediately." "The Coalition doesn't know what they're dealing with," Alex said. "Those weapons won't stop the Voidborn." Ray's expression hardened. "It's worse than that. Look at the markings." Alex squinted at the dropship. Instead of standard Coalition insignia, it bore a modified symbol, the Coalition emblem intertwined, with a glyph he somehow recognized as meaning ascension in the language of Vela's people. "That's not regular Coalition," Ray explained urgently. "That's Chimera Division, a Black Ops unit that's been hunting the marked for years. They've been experimenting with Voidborn technology." "How is that possible?" Alex asked, but even as the words left his mouth, another memory surfaced, not his own, but Vela's. A crashed Voidborn scout ship discovered decades ago. Coalition scientists studying technology they couldn't possibly understand. Dangerous experiments opening temporary microbreaches. They think they can control it, Alex realized aloud. They've been trying to weaponize Voidborn tech. The dropship landed, and armed soldiers poured out, their combat suits enhanced with components that pulsed with the same dark energy as the breach. "In sight. Now." Ray shoved Alex toward the crevice as she pulled a small device from her pocket. She activated it, creating a localized energy field that momentarily distorted their heat signatures. They slipped into the narrow passage just as energy weapons fire impacted the rocks where they'd been standing. The passage descended steeply, illuminated only by the patterns glowing beneath their skin. "The Coalition's been compromised," Ray explained as they moved deeper underground. "Some high-ranking officials made contact with the Voidborn years ago through early experiments. They've been manipulated ever since, preparing Earth for invasion while thinking they were gaining power for themselves. And they want us because? The essence we carry is the key to permanent breaches. They need at least one of us alive. Her voice grew grimmer. The others they've captured, they've been experimenting on them, trying to extract and replicate the essence. The passage opened into a larger tunnel that showed signs of advanced engineering, smooth walls embedded with technology that hummed with power. Ahead, Alex could sense the presence of others like them. The remaining marked. They rounded a corner and entered a vast chamber carved into the bedrock. In its center stood what could only be described as a temple, ancient stone architecture seamlessly integrated with technology beyond human understanding. 4 people waited there, each glowing with the same internal light as Alex and Ray. "You made it," said a tall man with weathered features who Alex immediately sensed was Delta One. "And just in time. The Harbinger is fully materialized." "We've got another problem," Ray reported. "Chimera Division is here. They tracked us somehow." A woman stepped forward, her right arm entirely transformed by the essence, luminescent patterns having replaced human flesh entirely. "It's worse than that. They didn't track you. They tracked her." She pointed at the center of the temple structure. There, suspended in a field of energy, floated Vela. "No," Alex breathed. "How?" Delta One's expression was grim. "She surrendered herself to them. 3 days ago. Right after she saved you." The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. "Why would she do that?" "Because I had no choice." Vela's voice spoke directly into their minds. Her form flickered, weakened. "The veil was failing. My people are gone. I am the last. I needed to create the final marked one and gather you all together." "You let yourself be captured?" Ray asked incredulously. "Yes." Vela's form pulsed faintly. "To hide the true purpose of the marked from the Voidborn and their human puppets. They believe you are keys to opening permanent breaches. They do not know you are weapons designed to close them forever." A tremor shook the chamber, dust and small rocks falling from above. "They're coming," Delta One warned. "Both Chimera and the Voidborn. We need to complete the confluence now." "Wait," Alex said, stepping forward. "What exactly is the confluence? And why 7 of us? I can feel there's something you're not telling me." Vela's form brightened momentarily. "Clever human. Yes, there is more." Her mental voice grew heavier with sorrow. "The confluence will indeed close all breaches and strengthen the veil permanently. But the power required, it will consume the essence within all of you." "You mean we'll lose these abilities?" Ray concluded. "No," Vela corrected softly. "The essence is now intertwined with your life force. The confluence will require all of it. All 7 marked must sacrifice themselves to save this reality." Stunned silence fell over the group. Alex's mind reeled with the implication. To save humanity, to save everything, they would have to die. Before anyone could respond, another violent tremor rocked the sanctuary. Part of the ceiling collapsed, revealing the night sky, and the massive form of the Harbinger directly above, its impossible geometry filling Alex with instinctive dread that at the same moment, explosions echoed from the tunnel they'd used to enter. Chimera Division had found them. "We're out of time," Delta One announced, moving to a position in the temple. "Take your places. We knew what we signed up for." The others moved to form a circle around Vela, each standing on a marked position. Alex hesitated, his mind racing. "Wait," he said, another fragment of Vela's knowledge surfacing. "There's something else here. Something you're all missing." He stepped closer to Vela, studying the energy field containing her. The Voidborn didn't just come because the veil was weakening. They came because of what Vela is carrying. He turned to face the others, understanding dawning. She's not just the last of her kind. She's carrying the compressed essence of her entire civilization. Billions of souls, preserved at the moment of their extinction. He looked back at Vela, whose form shimmered with acknowledgement. That's the real prize the Voidborn want. With it, they could not just invade our reality, they could reshape it entirely. The chamber shook again as multiple breaches began forming around them. Dark tendrils seeped through cracks in reality itself. Outside, they could hear the sounds of Chimera Division's advanced weapons engaging with void-born entities. "There's another way," Alex said, the knowledge crystallizing in his mind. "A third option Vela didn't tell us about." He met her gaze, seeing the truth there. Because it would require her complete destruction, not just her essence. Vela's form pulsed once in confirmation. "You see deeper than the others, Alex." "Yes, there is another way. But it would mean the final end of my species. Everything we were, everything we knew, gone forever." Delta One stepped forward urgently. "What are you talking about? What other option?" Before Alex could answer, the sanctuary's defenses breached. Coalition soldiers in modified combat suits poured in from one side while void-born entities phased through the walls from another. The two forces, puppet and master, converging on the temple at the center. "Make your choice quickly," marked one. Vela's voice whispered in Alex's mind alone. "Sacrifice the 7 of you, or sacrifice the last remnant of my entire civilization. The third path requires only one life, but it must be freely given." The heart. Inger's massive form now filled the entire opening above them, its presence bending light and gravity around it. Reality itself seemed to strain under its weight. In that moment, Alex understood everything. Why Vela had chosen him specifically. Why his connection to her essence was stronger than the others. Why he alone could see the third path. He stepped forward, power building within him, his decision made. Power surged through Alex's body as he stepped toward the center of the temple. The luminescent patterns beneath his skin brightened until they became almost blinding, casting harsh shadows across the ancient chamber. The other marked watched in confusion as he approached Vela's suspended form. "What are you doing?" Ray shouted over the chaos of battle erupting around them. Chimera soldiers exchanged fire with the other marked while void-born entities phased in and out of reality, their forms distorting the very air. "Trust me," Alex called back, his voice resonating with newfound authority. He turned to Delta One. "Keep them off me for 30 seconds. That's all I need." The older man nodded grimly and gestured to the others. The 5 remaining marked formed a defensive perimeter, channeling their essence into barriers and weapons of pure energy. Alex placed his hands on the field containing Vela. The moment they connected, his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of his body, beyond the sanctuary, beyond Earth itself. He saw the universe as Vela's people had, a vast, interconnected web of realities, with the veil acting as a protective membrane around their small corner of existence. "You understand now," Vela's voice echoed in his mind. "Why it had to be you." "Because I was dying," Alex replied internally. "My life force was already fading when you found me. The connection between us is different than the others. The essence merged more completely with you because your body was surrendering to death. You became more than marked. You became a vessel capable of channeling far greater power." Around them, the battle intensified. A void-born entity breached the defensive line, its limbs stretching impossibly as it reached for them. Ray intercepted it, her essence-charged fist punching through its amorphous form, but the effort left her vulnerable to Chimera weapons' fire. She fell back, wounded but still fighting. "We don't have much time," Alex said, focusing on the task at hand. "Show me how to do this." The knowledge flooded into him, complex and ancient, a technique developed by Vela's civilization as a last resort against the Voidborn. Not just closing breaches, but burning them out of existence entirely. Alex began the process, drawing the essence from his own body and focusing it into a catalyst. Pain ripped through him as the energy built, not just his pain, but the echoed suffering of billions whose consciousnesses were preserved in Vela's form. "When you release this power," Vela warned, "you must direct it precisely. Too broad, and it will destroy everything within 1,000 kilometers. Too narrow, and the Harbinger will survive." The sanctuary walls began to crack as the Harbinger exerted its immense gravitational influence. Reality itself seemed to bend around the massive entity as it reached down through the opening above. A Chimera soldier broke through the defensive line, aiming a specialized weapon directly at Alex. Before he could fire, Delta One intercepted him, the two colliding in a flash of energy that left neither standing. "Now, Alex!" Ray screamed, holding off 3 void-born entities with the last of her strength. "We can't hold them any longer." With a final surge of will, Alex shattered the field containing Vela. Her form dissolved into pure energy that flowed into him, not just her essence, but the preserved consciousness of her entire species. The knowledge of a billion-year-old civilization flooded his mind, threatening to overwhelm his identity entirely. For one terrifying moment, Alex felt himself disappearing, his human consciousness drowning in the vast ocean of alien minds. Then he felt Vela's presence, distinct among the multitude, guiding him back to himself. "Remember who you are," her voice anchored him. "Your humanity is what makes this possible. It's why I chose you." Alex opened his eyes, now glowing with the combined power of billions of consciousnesses. The Voidborn recoiled, sensing the threat. The Chimera commander shouted orders to focus all fire on Alex, but it was too late. Alex raised his hands toward the Harbinger and released the power building within him, not as a weapon, but as a restructuring force. Energy erupted from his body in a controlled wave that enveloped the entire sanctuary, freezing everyone and everything in place as it rewrote the fundamental laws of reality in its path. The breaches began to close, not just sealing but ceasing to have ever existed. The Voidborn entities caught in the effect didn't die. They simply became incompatible with this plane of existence, their forms dissolving as they were ejected back to their own dimension. The Harbinger fought against the effect, its impossible geometry warping and twisting as it struggled to maintain its presence. For a moment, it seemed the massive entity might resist the restructuring wave through sheer power. Then Alex focused the full force of the combined consciousnesses on it. The Harbinger shuddered, its form destabilizing. With a sound like reality itself tearing apart and then instantly mending, the entity vanished, not just from this place, but from any place that could interact with their universe. The wave continued outward, closing every breach across Earth and its colonies, strengthening the veil beyond anything that had existed before. The Chimera soldiers dropped to the ground, the alien influence in their minds and technology purged by the restructuring wave. As the energy began to fade, Alex felt himself falling. Ray caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. The other surviving Marked gathered around, their expressions mixing awe and concern. "Did it work?" Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. The patterns beneath his skin were fading, the light diminishing. "Yes," Ray confirmed, scanning the readings on a device pulled from her pocket. "All breaches closed. The veil is restored, stronger than before." She looked at him more closely. "What did you do, Alex?" "That wasn't the confluence." "Something else," he managed. "A third option. Vela's people, they don't need to live as separate consciousnesses anymore. They've become part of the veil itself." Ray's eyes widened in understanding. "You turned them into the barrier?" Alex nodded weakly. "Their essences, their knowledge, all of it restructured into the fabric of reality itself. They're not gone. They've evolved into something else entirely." He closed his eyes, feeling the last of the borrowed power leaving his body. Where there had been billions of consciousnesses, only emptiness remained, and the fading echo of Vela's presence. "You're dying," Ray said softly, not a question but a statement. "The restructuring required a living conduit," Alex explained. "I was Aura. Audi marked for death when Vela found me. She just postponed it for a while." The surviving Marked exchanged solemn glances, understanding the sacrifice that had been made. "What about us?" one of them asked. "The essence within us?" Alex managed a small smile. "It's still there. Different now. You're the guardians of the new veil. The last connection to Vela's people." His breathing grew labored, each word requiring more effort. "The coalition will want answers. Tell them what they need to know. Not everything." He gripped Ray's hand. "There are other threats out there. Different ones. You'll be needed." As darkness began to close in around his vision, Alex felt a strange sensation, as if he were simultaneously fading and expanding. The pain vanished, replaced by a profound sense of connection to something vast and ancient yet newborn. Alex. Ray's voice seemed to come from very far away. With his last conscious thought, Alex reached for that connection, expecting oblivion. Instead, he found Vela waiting. I told you this was your beginning, not your end. Her familiar voice welcomed him as his human consciousness merged with the transformed essence of her civilization. The barrier between life and death is just another kind of veil. 6 months later, at a remote coalition outpost, Ray stood alone on an observation deck, watching the sunset over an alien horizon. The patterns beneath her skin glowed softly in the fading light. "They're mobilizing a new exploration fleet," she said to the empty air, "pushing farther into uncharted space. They still don't understand what's out there." The air beside her shimmered faintly, almost imperceptibly. To anyone else, it would have appeared to be nothing more than a heat distortion. But Ray smiled, sensing the familiar presence. "I know you can't manifest fully," she continued. "But the others needed to know. We've detected something at the edge of the system. Not Voidborn, something else. Something older." The shimmer intensified briefly, forming a vague outline that resembled a human shape. "Yes," Ray nodded, interpreting the response that only she could perceive. "We'll be ready. The 5 of us are training the new recruits. There are more emerging, people with potential to become marked. Delta One had contingency plans in place for decades." The sun dipped below the horizon, stars appearing in the darkening sky. The shimmering presence began to fade with the light. "I understand," Ray said softly. "The veil has its limits. Even the new one." She straightened, her expression resolute. "We'll hold the line here. You and Vela watch the spaces between." As the presence vanished completely, Ray turned toward the door where the other marked waited. Beyond them, a new generation of Guardians prepared for threats they couldn't yet imagine, and beyond reality itself, in the spaces between dimensions, Alex, now something both more and less than human, continued his vigil alongside the transformed consciousness of an ancient civilization, watching over the thin veil that separated order from chaos, existence from oblivion, and the known universe from whatever waited beyond. 2 years after the events at the sanctuary, Earth and its colonies had largely returned to normal, or at least what passed for normal in a post-contact world. The official story released by the Coalition explained the anomalous events as an experimental weapons test gone wrong. Most people accepted this explanation, eager to move on with their lives. Few knew how close everything had come to ending. Ray stood on the balcony of the new sanctuary built into the side of a mountain on Mars, watching the twin moons rise over the rusty landscape. The facility, disguised as a research outpost, had become home to 17 newly marked individuals, people carefully selected and prepared for the burden they would carry. "They're improving faster than we did," she said to the empty air beside her. The familiar shimmer appeared, stronger now than it had been in those first uncertain months. Alex's presence had grown more defined over time, occasionally even manifesting a translucent outline visible to those attuned to the veil's energies. "The Coalition's rebuilding Chimera Division," she continued, leaning against the railing. "New name, new leadership, but same mission. They're still looking for ways to weaponize what they don't understand." She sighed heavily. Some people never learn. The air rippled beside her, and for a brief moment, Alex appeared almost solid, still glowing with the patterns of Vela's essence, but unmistakably himself. "I know," Ray responded to words only she could hear. "The veil will protect us from the worst threats, but the human ones are still our responsibility." She smiled faintly. "That's why we're expanding the network. There's a new sanctuary on Europa now, and another being built on Titan. We're preparing, just like Delta One would have wanted." Inside the facility, the new marked trained under the guidance of the survivors. Through reinforced windows, Ray could see them practicing, channeling the essence in controlled bursts, learning to sense breaches and anomalies, studying the vast knowledge left behind by Vela's civilization. "They've declassified the records from first contact," Ray told Alex's presence. "Turns out the Coalition knew about other intelligent life from the beginning. They just kept it quiet to prevent panic." She shook her head. All those years of secrecy, and in the end, it nearly cost us everything. The shimmer intensified, Alex's form becoming clearer for a brief moment. Ray nodded in response to his unheard words. You're right. It would have happened eventually, with or without human interference. The Voidborn had been testing the old veil for millennia. She glanced down at her hands, at the luminescent patterns that now pulsed in sync with the shimmering presence beside her. I've been studying the archives we recovered from the sanctuary. Veilless people knew the veil was failing for generations. That's why they created the Marked in the first place, as a contingency. The soft chimes sounded from inside. Time for the evening council meeting. The 5 original survivors had formed a leadership group, guiding the new generation and monitoring potential threats. With coalition attention focused elsewhere, they had built a network of allies and resources spanning the solar system. I should go, Ray said, pushing away from the railing. Leon's bringing the latest reports from the outer colonies. There's been unusual activity near Neptune, probably nothing, but we need to stay vigilant. As she turned to leave, the air beside her solidified momentarily. Alex appeared fully visible for a brief, startling second. Not as the soldier she had known, but as something more. The essence that had once been merely patterns beneath the skin now formed his entire being, his human features overlaid with geometric structures of light that seemed to extend beyond three-dimensional space. I miss you too, she said softly. All of us do. But what you've become, it's more important than any of us realized. She reached out, her hand passing through his luminous form. The veil doesn't just keep things out, it connects everything within. You see that now, don't you? His form nodded, a bittersweet smile visible before the manifestation began to fade. I'll tell the others you're watching over us, Ray promised. It helps them to know you're still here in some way. As Alex's presence dissipated, returning to the vast network of consciousness that now formed the veil, Ray felt the familiar sensation, a gentle pressure at the edge of her mind, like a hand briefly squeezing hers in reassurance. Inside the facility, she joined the others around a holographic display of the solar system. Points of light indicated the locations of each sanctuary, each marked individual, and each potential anomaly they were monitoring. It was a vast undertaking, but they were no longer alone. Any word from our friend? Asked Leon, the youngest of the original survivors, as Ray took her seat. He's still with us, she confirmed, watching the spaces between. The meeting proceeded, discussions of defensive strategies and training protocols filling the room. Throughout it all, Ray felt the subtle presence of the veil, of Alex and Vela and billions of others, surrounding them, connecting them to something greater than themselves. Later that night, as the Martian outpost slept, a lone technician monitored the deep space array. A signal appeared, faint but distinct, originating from beyond the heliopause. Not Voidborn, but something else. Something unknown. Before the technician could sound an alert, the signal changed, reconfiguring itself into a coalition standard format. The message was brief, not hostile. Refugees. Seeking sanctuary. The technician stared at the screen in confusion. No human vessel was that far out. No known alien civilization had coalition communication protocols. As she watched, additional text appeared. Tell Ray. The universe is larger than anyone knew. The veil protects, but it also connects. It's time to meet the neighbors. The signature at the end made the technician's eyes widen. She reached for the emergency contact protocol, her hands shaking slightly. The adventure, it seemed, was only beginning.